All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alexa Borden. I am the head of admin team on AWFC, and I am here to introduce our moderator today, who is Connor Cook. She is an AWFC board member, a Sundance Fellow, and currently working on Snowland documentary. Connor, do you want to take it away?
I do. Thank you, Alexa, so much for being here. Some of you know Alexa and I frequently collaborate on film scores and other things, and she's an amazing composer as well as the most organized person I know. So thank you for running tech for me today. We appreciate you so much. And next, I would love to introduce my wonderful panelists. I'm really thrilled they all said yes, because I was like, maybe one or two people will say yes, but they all said yes. I couldn't believe it. So I'm going to introduce everybody, and then I think we'll start this round. We can all go in order, and because my first question is, how did you get into composing? So first, let's start with you, Amanda Cawley, and then I'll go through everybody in order.
Okay, and you want me to answer that question right now?
Yeah, do a little intro and then a little bit about how you got into composing.
All right. Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to see so many people here, some familiar faces. And so my name is Amanda Cawley. I am a composer based in British Columbia, Canada. And I started off with the fake it to make it regime. So I got my first gig by just showing up at a film festival, finding out where the after party was, crashing it, and just showing up uninvited in my little business suit with my business cards and introducing myself to people as a composer. And at the time, it was very daunting because I remember it was a room full of pretty much middle-aged men at the time, and I was 19 years old, and I was just like, hey, I'm a composer. Anyway, it paid off, and I actually followed up with someone that I'd met there, and I was really interested in the work that they were doing, and it was a documentary, so it's important to have something to talk about and not just show up and say, hey, can I work for you? But I watched the film that he directed that day, so I went up to him and just started talking about his film, and that's, I think, the most important thing, is to connect over something that's meaningful to them and let them know how you can be of service to them rather than just looking out for your own needs. So we connected over documentary filmmaking and ended up following up with a coffee date, and he had a documentary TV series, and I just kind of got my foot in the door that way. Started building up credits, working in documentary. I had a really serendipitous entry into the world of animation, which I won't fully get into right now because I want to hear from all the other panelists, but basically just the I just started doing it and just kept believing in myself and kept going for it and manifesting that for myself. And yeah, I will pass it on to the next composer.
Love that. That's amazing and inspiring. Let's go alphabetically by first name. So Brittany, you're next.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Brittany. I got my start into film composing kind of the traditional route. I majored in music theory and composition in undergrad for the same school and program as Connor, actually.
That's how we met.
And then went and got my master's at Columbia College Chicago, where I met Jesi, and and then moved out to LA with this wealth of knowledge, but no idea how to like take that first step and actually get going. So I kind of just spread myself as thin as possible to try to open as many doors. I interned at remote control, sonic fuel, and craft angle management all at the same time, just to try to see where a door will open first. And luckily, a composer by the name of Jake Monaco was looking to hire his first assistant after about 9 months of just continuous interning around town. And I auditioned for that and ended up working for him, starting as a tech assistant, going up to over the course of 7 years. Now we co-score together, and he's just been such a cheerleader and a huge support system for my career, and he does a lot of animation, and so that's opened a lot of doors for my own individual composition journey in animation, thanks to the connections that I got to make working under him. So that's how I got here.
Amazing. And cool to have back-to-back differing endpoints. So that leads us to our next panelist, Jesi.
Hi, I'm Jesi. Thank you so much for having us here. Also went through Columbia, and yeah, after I got out to LA, I did about the 9 months of struggling to find work, and then miraculously got hired by the wonderful composer Michael Kramer and started as his assistant and additional writer. And our first gig was actually Lego Star Wars, so I was thrown right into it, and good Lord, it was terrifying. But I learned a ton in the process, and we also did Lego Ninjago, the TV series, which he's been there from the start, obviously. And fast forward, did Sundance, did the ASCAP workshop, just finished the Universal Composers Initiative, and Kramer and I ended up co-scoring with another composer as well, an animated series called Navamore. And then I did Dota Dragon's Blood with Dino Madigan. And up until today, which now I have a DreamWorks Apple TV series coming out called Curses. It'll be out on October 27th.
Congrats. That's amazing. Fabulous. Well, last but not least, let's check in with Tangelene Bolton.
Thanks, Connor. Thank you for having me. It's so great to be amongst all of you here today and hear about everyone's accomplishments and where they got today. My story, let's see, I was always really into music at a young age. Around my teens, I toyed with the idea of maybe being a director, and then eventually made my way over to Berklee College of Music, where I got a degree in film scoring, and then eventually got an internship here with Hans Zimmer at Remote Control, just like Brittany. I was there for about 2 years, and then eventually found a mentor named Bobby Tahori, who was doing a lot of video games at the time, actually. And then he also started getting some animated series, one in particular called Shimmer and Shine. And it was cool because he was, really willing to give me a lot of training, and I eventually went on to writing additional music for him on Shimmer and Shine, which was a lot of fun. Nick Jr., lots of, Mickey Mouse scoring. And then eventually I got a Sundance Fellowship with Connor. Sundance, I always forget what it's called. Sundance.
It's a hard title to remember. Sundance Film, Music, and Animation Lab. Yeah. It's a lot of words.
That lab. And a Disney animated short. And then from there, I've been doing a lot of live action these days, actually. But that's sort of my, how I delved into animation and where I am today.
Amazing. By the way, I loved Warrior Nun, but who doesn't? Your music is so cool. All of your music is so cool. That's why I'm so excited to have you all here. You all have vastly different styles, which we will get into that as well. Now, for the next couple of questions, we don't have to go in order. You can jump in or, however. I just wanted to do that one first because that's seems like the traditional thing people do. So my next question is kind of actually hinging on what you said, Tangelene. My next question is, do you find composing for animation different than composing for live action? And if so, is it the rules that are different? Is it the palette? What makes it different?
I'll jump in. I do find them quite different. In fact, sometimes when I'm coming off of an animated project and I go back into live action, I'll and this is just a shortcoming of mine, but I find myself overscoring or hitting things that don't necessarily need to be hit. And I think that's because with animation, you already have that willing suspension of disbelief, where with live action characters, you don't necessarily have that. So I think it changes quite a bit for the process for me personally. But yeah, that's just been.
I could chime off that too. I completely agree. I think it also depends on the live action project, if there's a lot of like heavy action in it and it's really dramatic overall, or if it's like a genre project, I feel like it could be super similar to animation. The show I did, Warrior Nun on Netflix, that one I would say was pretty similar to how I would score animation. Like I'm hitting all the emotional moments. I'm not really just adding a bed for something. I'm pretty much scoring all the emotion, like whatever is on screen. I'm really just acting as that extra enhancement to what we're feeling in every moment. But it can be a challenge in and of itself. I mean, I guess live action in that sense, because you're carving a lot of those moments. You're going between a lot of extremes, but that can be the fun part. I think that's why we all probably enjoy both.
Definitely
Yeah.
agree with both of those things. And I think something to consider too is also the audience of it. So a lot of the time for animation, depending on what it is, sometimes it's for a younger audience. And I'm working on a series right now that's a preschool audience. So we really tell them how to feel in every situation. It's like, oh, it's scary right now. The music's scary. And then we're like, oh, it's okay. So the music's happy. And there's a lot of that. Like it's really, really obvious writing as opposed to a lot of the other kinds of styles I've done where our audience will range so drastically. And we really want to come from more of an artistic approach. And like, this is open to interpretation. We're just supporting this. This could be this or this. So it's a little bit more of a nuanced kind of writing. Whereas the animation that I've done has been a little bit more on the head, obvious writing, which isn't always the case in animation, just depends on the style of it and the audience.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I think that there are a lot of kind of storytelling differences. A lot of times everything is kind of on the surface in an animated show, like whether it's the visuals, the colors, and especially with where a lot of my experience is in preschool animation, it's also just what they're feeling. And so whereas in perhaps like a live action that's a little deeper or for an older audience, you have a lot more that is kind of unpacked and taken out as you go. Whereas animation, everything's kind of in your face, but then you point to different parts throughout the thing and highlight different parts. But to be like the devil's advocate here, there's a lot of similarities as well. You have the same sort of emotional arc. It's just maybe toned down in a different way, but the layout of an episode is a lot of times very similar. You have the same kind of character development. And in animation, though, because there is so much going on, you really have to let the character kind of be the storyteller. And you just hone in on what the character is doing, experiencing, and score and react to that. It's that I feel like is a big like golden rule for animation as opposed to drama, where maybe you're scoring like the mood or of a cave or a cavern or something, or like a heartbreak. You're scoring that, whereas in an animation you're reacting to a character slumping and being physically sad. But yeah, there's a lot of similarities, but tons of differences.
That's a really good point, Brittany. I'm still thinking through what you just said about being really with the character in animation, which kind of makes sense in a certain way. Because with drama or, live action, yeah, directors might want you to play two things at once. Like, hey, can you heighten, this stress level while also making it sweet or whatever. But in animation, because somebody handmade this, it's like you kind of owe it to the character to stay with them. That's really cool. I'm going to be thinking about that for a while. But let's go to our next question. So this is kind of a shorter one, or maybe not. Animation can often be a lengthy and tedious process for the animators. At what point do you all typically come into projects? This can be another jump on in if you want.
I'll jump in. Yeah. So with animation, you really, really want a fully locked cut. It's right at the end. It's very rare that you won't get a locked cut. And actually, I was just in a situation where I didn't have a locked cut because I was just working on an animation short film, which was actually about a composer. So they needed the music first in a lot of the sense. Like they needed the character to play piano and they needed her to score out music. So they had to, it was a really interesting process where I was I was working with script and working right from the beginning, but that's extremely rare. I would say I would always fight for a fully locked cut, where there's like in other like documentary or something, it's always kind of moving and right until the end, it's not locked. But with animation, you're really scoring every moment and the timing is everything. So if just they change one little thing, it's gonna throw a rock at your whole score and you're like, now I have to adjust everything, and you've maybe made all these crazy time signatures and crazy tempos just to get it perfect. So it's really, really specific. So I think it's always kind of right at the end where I'm involved, but you're right, it's a huge process. And it's incredible how long it takes to make an animation, how many people are involved and how many decisions are made just to get it to the point where it is when it comes onto your table. So for me, it gives me this like overwhelming sense of appreciation for what this has already gone through, which is where it becomes quite easy to like let go of the ego and just serve the picture, because you're like, really everything that's on screen here has made it into the cut because of a decision that's been made, a line that's been drawn. Everything is exact. Whether it's, you know, in other kind of in live action or documentary, yeah, they have like a plan for everything, but there's a lot that happens quite organically that's not pre-planned. So does that kind of answer your question? I think I answered a bunch of questions.
I love it. Thank you. That makes so much sense to me. What do the rest of y'all think? When do you come into a project?
I will say that, yes, like definitely locked. I have like scored to rough animatics for sure though, which can be interesting because it's only really like scribbles and lines and you're just like trying to guess like the color is not there. So which can make a huge difference, you know what I mean? So I'm like really into color, especially like with live action. Like once the color comes, you're like, whoa, this is like a completely different mood. Same with animation. So in that sense, you really got to just make sure you have as much info as you can so that as you're scoring, you just can keep in mind what the end result's going to look like. And then I've also I've come into positions where there's been like maybe specific scenes that they've tweaked a little bit. And then they'll let you know like, okay, this scene, like here's a new cut. It's just this really specific scene that changed a little bit. Obviously, we don't like hearing that. If you can, please always let people know like not to do that. But those are the two kind of positions I've noticed where things have changed a bit, or I didn't have all the info I needed.
That makes sense. Also, what you said about color makes sense for your music. As soon as you said that, I thought through what I've heard of yours. And like the instruments you choose, the color, that makes sense. Okay, so other thoughts on when you come in to the project? And this is like not the most fun question. We'll get to more fun questions. This is kind of like a dry question.
Yeah, I would just echo what they both said already, and then add, I guess maybe from like the very, very get-go of like the demoing process. I've a couple times when I've been auditioning, they'll send like either just screenshots or the storyboard so that I can write sort of like a suite. So it's not as much to picture, obviously, but that's getting in there really early on. And then, you know, of course, if you get the project, then you can hopefully take those themes that you've used in the suite and sort of put them into the series if it all still fits once you get the locked cut. But I've been very fortunate with animation in that it's always come in as locked. And yeah, and I think there was one situation where, yeah, same as Tangelene was saying, it was just like a tiny little adjustment, and thankfully it didn't throw anything off. So but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much standard across the board. Yeah, how what everyone said. I think a couple things just to add. Sometimes I have gotten an unlocked cut for animation, but unlocked animation, at least in my experience, is a little different from unlocked in like a live action project, where maybe there's still some animatic chunks in the project, but the timing overall is pretty locked. It's just you don't have a fully polished picture perhaps to like score to initially. One tip, one thing to consider if you're on a project where you do kind of get started compositionally, when you get the lock, you could request for the animatics. It's a great way to get a sense of a story and start to write some character themes. A lot of times there's even temp dialogue in there. You can get a sense of attitude. You can get a sense of like just like any sort of one-liners that may want a little like motif for them, things like that, just to get your gears going. But yeah, typically locked in starting is the way to go.
That's a great point about the animatics.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Brittany, like that's such good advice. Just kind of like ask for more. There's so much content they have, and as long as you've signed a non-disclosure agreement, they're going to be happy to share their picture boards, their color palettes, like all that stuff that's actually going to help inform your stylistic choices too. So I that's great advice. Like ask after that, like go for it. Show that you're interested in all elements of the animation if you don't have like the final locked cut. And it might give you a little bit more insight to some of the stylistic choices that they made. You're like, oh, okay, all the furniture is angular. Like maybe that's a choice. And, or, you know, there's so many things to consider in it. So I think that information is available. So just go after it if you don't have it.
Yeah, that's great advice. Now, my next question is kind of similar to this question because it popped up while I was listening to y'all talk. I'm curious, and this could be live action or animation, what type of deadlines are y'all seeing these days? Because it's different for everything. I recently did additional music on a Hallmark movie. Our deadline was 11 days, which I thought was insane. So I'm curious, that's an opinionated statement, but I'm curious what y'all deal with deadlines.
Oh, you go ahead, Brittany.
Oh no, I was going to say it really depends on the project, and I am working on a couple right now where the deadlines vary drastically. Some projects are super organized. They give you a calendar and a spreadsheet and all your dates are planned out for the whole series, and you're like, this is amazing. I just put this in my Google Cal. I'm good. Sometimes you send something in and then you wait for a couple weeks for feedback and they ask for it in 48 hours. It just depends on the project that you're on, and you just have to kind of go with the flow. And if you get a project where the timing is really spaced out and they ask you, is this okay? Is this enough time? You just say, oh yeah, I think this will work. And you're just like, so nice. I can't tell them it's so nice. And sometimes you get something where it's the complete opposite and you're pulling out your hair. But you know, it just depends on the production, really.
Yeah, I'll echo that. They are often really well scheduled because it's such a big production, and there's always in animation, like you're not really going to see so much the level of like amateur animation that you would maybe in the film industry, where you've got a lot of people making these films on really tight budgets, but it's not really possible in animation. Like if they're making an animation, they're going to have a budget because there's just so many people that are involved in making it. So that means there's always going to be a supervisor, a post soup, and supervisor for all departments. And the schedule that I've always received has been really laid out. I love it. It's not very often in film and TV that we just get like a schedule like, here's how your next 6 months is going to look like. And they really stick to it, is what I've found in my experience. Like, and so I deliver, like I'm on an animation TV series. I've done 78 episodes and each season is 26 episodes, and I do an episode a week, and it's like really strict. That's a 9-minute episode. Really strict. Like this day it goes to, you know, it's like every Friday I'll deliver, every Tuesday I'll get notes back, so it's just kind of like you get into a routine, and that's really, really nice. It doesn't always happen like that. And sometimes they do fall behind routine, or they'll be like, hey, can you push this episode? We've got like a Christmas special. We need to just like shoot it in there right now. That'll happen. But for the most part, it's, in my experience, been the most organized workflow I've ever been a part of.
Wow, cool. That sounds nice.
Yeah, same from my end as well. The series that I'm just coming off of, I think it's about 2 weeks per episode. Episodes are 23 minutes long, and they were pretty wall to wall, but same thing. Everything was laid out beautifully, and I can't tell you how incredible that is, because yes, the opposite definitely happens as well. And so having that laid out is great. But then, yeah, of course, it depends on every project. I did the Star Wars biomes and vehicle fly-throughs a couple years ago, and I had 6 days, I think, for about 35 minutes of music and like 5 new themes for Star Wars, and I was terrified, and I don't think I slept at all. But yeah, so it just depends.
Cool. Tangelene, anything you want to say on that question?
I agree with both of you. I mean, yeah, I've been in situations where it's been pretty scheduled out. I think sometimes if you're working with like maybe like independent people, it can take a long time. So maybe you'll just be waiting for them to finish, especially because animation can take so long. So I'd say maybe you're waiting, rushing, or you're on time. I think there's all it's for all of them.
Yes, and some are more stressful than others. Cool. Well, that's all good info. I have another question that we did kind of touch on a little bit earlier. I think Jesi touched on this, but maybe I can't remember exactly. So my next question is, oh, and I should also say we'll have a little time at the end for questions. So if any of you have questions, which, by the way, thank you all so much for being here. I see so many familiar names. I appreciate you all giving your time to this today. It means a lot. So my next question is, I'm a tangenter, so apologies. I'm curious about y'all's processes. Do you start a new project with themes, character themes, or otherwise? Do you find yourself gravitating towards certain instruments or groups of instruments for animation versus live action? That's a lot of question. So have at it if you wish.
Okay. For something like
I can put it in the chat.
For something like a series, I spend a lot of time right off the top of the project developing the palette. So kind of like figuring out the right sound for the show. And sometimes if it's already been a reoccurring series, they might be like, just follow suit. This has been working for us for 12 seasons. Like, we want to keep going with this kind of style. So a lot of it was about the palette, but then yes, definitely theme, big concept material. I would start with writing that. And things that are going to be like reoccurring, like little character themes, big moments. And then basically once you've got that established, I just have like my nice session template. And it's really important when you're doing an episode a week to have like your session template dialed in just so that when you go to compose, everything's kind of lined up there and you're not actually thinking about those choices of like, okay, what string sample do I want to use? Like, you're not thinking about that when you're just like in the flow of things, you're just going for it. And look, sure, there'll be like the occasional, like, oh, this is a farm episode, let's throw in some banjo, or like, this is Christmas, we're gonna have some bells, or like whatever. There's gonna be things that change, but for the most part, I feel like I kind of follow that. And then when I start with the episode, like kind of tempo mapping is the first thing that I'm looking at. Like, okay, what moments are we gonna hit? Let's kind of get the tempo map found out, and then like work backwards from there. And then I'll write a piano sketch and I will then fill in my orchestration. Like, so I work this way and then I work down and I just like fill in everything as I go. And I think that's just like, that's my process for this specific animation TV series, because it's like a very regimented thing that it needs to kind of be specific like that. But there's definitely so many different ways to start a project and so many different approaches depending on what it is. So I'll throw it to somebody else to continue with that.
I'll jump in. Yeah, similarly, I think template is so important, because you can step away from being creative unintentionally by just trying to find the right sounds or what samples you prefer and all of that. So template first. And then for me, this last project I did, I was lucky enough to be able to use one of the themes that I wrote in the demo process. So that was really nice to be able to start with that. It doesn't always work out like that, but per episode, the first thing I do, and this is just my process, is I will put in a ton of markers and just like the different moments I need to hit, when the emotion's changing, if we're switching POV, the really big jump scares. The series I'm talking about was like a horror, action, drama, comedy, adventure. Anyway, and
Wait, do you have any more descriptors for
I
it?
know, I hate saying that because it sounds like, oh yes, I does all of these things, but genuinely, I was like, oh, it's actually all of them. And then we changed
Cool.
countries almost every episode, and so I had to change. Anyways, markers. And this, I'm a really big, like, this is something that I live very strictly by with animation. It doesn't always work out, but I do the markers first, I lock them in place, and then I will find the tempo that fits per cue, of course, but you can generally find one tempo that will hit everything. Again, it doesn't always work like that, but it's for me been a really great way to do it. Also, because if things get recorded, then it's all in one tempo, so it's going to be okay. You don't have any crazy tempo changes. If you do have tempo changes or need to change meter or something, take any percussive stuff out. Just find a way to make that one bar, take out any motion and all of that, so that you're not stuck in one tempo and then have to jump to a different one. Anyways, side tip. And then then I go back once the tempo is set, and I'll start laying in the themes where I think they're appropriate, and then I just go to town and sketch, orchestrate, all that stuff.
Cool. Do you all start with piano sketches? Because you're all pianists, I think.
I do. Mostly, I do.
I'm always curious about that. That to me is so interesting. Maybe to everyone else too, who are not pianists as much.
I'm a pianist. I feel like I used to primarily sketch everything out on piano, but more of the time now, I feel like I sort of sketch thinking of what is going to be like the main melodic line or the main central part of each section, and I'll sketch on whatever instrument that is. That way I'm like thinking more in terms of changes of orchestration, changes of color, instead of feeling like locked into a piano vibe where I've kind of run into issues in the past where it still sounds piano-y, you know what I mean, with like layers on top. Sometimes I don't get stuck in that kind of space, but I feel like sometimes if I'm able to sketch with central instruments, like swapping between really quick, moving to the next one, it feels like I'm doing more work. I don't know if it works in the end, but at least when I'm adding on top, I feel like I'm already a few steps ahead, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It works for everyone. I'm curious if anyone else kind of goes that way too.
Yeah, let's keep going with that question.
Yeah, like I just finished working on a show. I think I can Coco Melon, and it's like very marimba based and like xylophone based, and so I would sketch everything on one of their like principal key template instruments. Like after I created my template for the show, like all of that is like 100%, like great advice, like always start with your template. And then I would read the scripts and kind of start to familiarize myself with like some of the characters, like psychology, like what makes these I mean, they're 3 years old, but still they all have personalities, and kind of pick little instruments for each one and kind of help bring some personality into the sketch and keep it in the world. So it feels like I'm always in the universe that I'm scoring, even when I'm sketching. And I feel like that just helps the creative process a little bit too.
That's a great tip.
Thanks.
Yes. Anyone else have thoughts on this topic?
I guess just template. I guess that's the biggest thing, that the takeaway from all this is make sure you have like your solid template, you know what sounds can correlate for different characters, what kind of instruments might act as like a cool bed, and maybe instead of strings, you'll use like a cool synth or an organ kind of texture as like a pad. Just figure out what you're really into in terms of instrumentation and your overall palette, because you want to just draw from those specific instruments, because that'll like determine the overall tone and just like sonic vibe for your show or film.
That's a great tip, especially like animation versus live action. Maybe you have two different templates, but they maybe serve the same purpose. And maybe you have a synth template where you have like a bass, a percussion, a filler instrument, a melodic instrument. But maybe each time you make, those are the elements, but each time they're changing, like, oh, now I'm doing orchestra. Now I'm doing totally synths. Now I'm doing a hybrid. Now I'm doing some weird thing that involves a lot of hand percussion. Who knows? But I think template is a really important thing. And of course, it's going to be different for every person based on your own tastes and, of course, the project. But I think I'm not an organized person. Thank goodness Alexa is. And it really helps keeping track of things that way. And it forces you to be organized in a certain way, even if it's not your natural state, which it's not for me, sadly. So this is really great so far, y'all. And I have one or two other sort of techie, or not techie, but workshopy questions. And then maybe we'll get into some other things. So I'm curious about, do each of you have a milestone in your career where you felt like, I'm really doing the thing? And it doesn't have to be animation. I'm just curious for like people on the call who are maybe at different stages in their career. Did you have a moment where you felt like, I'm doing it?
I don't know if that ever happens. I think like there are definitely moments where it was like, okay, oh my gosh, I'm making money doing composing and like I'm living off of this and stuff. But there's kind of like always, for me, there's always this like the next step. And I think it's sometimes hard to look back and go, wow, look how far I've come, as opposed to go like, oh my gosh, look at like how much further I have to get to where I'm going. So it's a really great question. And it poses me to think like, okay, when was that for me? Like there definitely has been some like confidence boosters and some points where I've thought, okay, I'm starting to really feel like comfortable in this field specifically. But every project poses a new challenge, and we kind of have to like learn a new job every time we take a new project, which I think helps create that like we're always kind of on the edge of our seat, like we're always like growing, which is a huge part of why I love this career. But for me, I don't think there'll ever be a moment where I just sit back and go, that's it, I did it. Unless maybe, like 40 years from now, there's some like crazy fantasy film trilogy that I've scored, and then I'll be like, okay, and now I can retire. But I think we're always like, I don't know if anyone here struggles with imposter syndrome, but it's so easy to compare yourself outwardly to other composers. And me, myself, like I was always comparing myself to like Danny Elfman and Howard Shore when I was like 22, and I was like, they have millions of dollars, so many people, like full orchestras, like sure my scores aren't going to sound that way, but it was just like a natural like habit that I fell into. So I think it's just kind of like the nature of our industry. But definitely like the more you do it, the more like you'll start to feel like confident or like proficient in the field, I suppose. But yeah, for me it's like it's just we keep going up and up, and yeah, keep plugging away.
Yeah, what a great answer. Like that's spot on. Like it's interesting. I know I see a lot of like younger faces, and I think going through like school and college, you have all these mile markers that happen very quickly, and then like on your ladder, and then all of a sudden like when you enter your career phase of your life, the rungs on the ladder are spread apart a lot wider. And it's just when you're in between the two rungs, it can feel like you're floating sometimes, but it's really important to not forget that you're still moving up. It just maybe takes a little longer, or it might feel like a plateau or you've slowed down, but no, it's just a longer journey to the next place. And so for me, like, I feel like I made it when I finally got to that place in my ladder, when I got to Los Angeles and I was finally embarking on this career portion of my life. You know, I went to school for this, I wanted to do this, and then getting to be out here and starting it is when I feel like I made it. But we're always growing, we're always learning. Every project has a curveball. But yeah, but we're all doing it, and that's the coolest part.
I love that ladder metaphor, Brittany. That really just kind of hit me in the gut in a good way. I think we all get really self-conscious about, like, especially with social media, let's be real, it's fake. It's not real. I'm not real on social media. I think you all know that probably. I put the good stuff, only the good stuff. But then you compare yourself to other people who are doing things and they're putting their good stuff. So it's a toxic cycle, really, and it's hard to get out of that. But the ladder metaphor, Brittany, really struck home for me. That's beautiful. Anyone else want to speak on this milestone question?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever really had that moment either. I mean, oh, yeah, I've never really thought, oh yes, I've made it either. But I guess the confidence booster for me, I think, was, oh God, this sounds really braggy. Was the Star Wars project and just becoming the first female and person of color to be lead composer. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of what Amanda was saying as well, with the sort of chasing the next thing. And I try to also step back and stay in the present as much as possible, because sometimes that can spoil what I'm currently doing. If I'm like, oh God, I'm not gonna have not gonna have work in like a couple months, and I need to get a bigger project and more credits, and which is all important and valid, but yeah, living in the present is also very important. And yeah, I don't know if I'll ever have the I made it moment, but we'll see.
TBD. Tangelene, thoughts?
Yeah, no, what everyone is saying is super valid, and we are always chasing the next thing, and it's important because we always want to grow. And I think definitely what Jesi said, leaning into maybe the moments where you have a few months off. I know it's kind of scary to just be like chilling, right? But allowing yourself to lean into chilling for a little bit is good, because it gives you time to kind of switch up your tastes a little bit. Maybe you want to work on a different project that you're not working on at the moment or haven't been working on over the past year. It's good to sort of reevaluate your goals, how you see yourself as an artist. And those moments where you're not constantly working on one specific project, those are the important times to reevaluate all that. In terms of my milestones, I feel like, every time you hit a milestone, it's great, and then you just want to keep going. So I would say for me, it was when I was younger, when I started writing additional music for other composers, and when other composers or collaborators started relying on me a little bit for my maybe creative decisions and my answers to problems. I feel like that's when I started feeling like I was making it, because that's like what we do, right? That's our craft. We're like answering we're solving people's problems, and they're relying on us for our creative input. So that's just so cool. I feel like that is just like a milestone in and of itself.
Totally. Well, I must say, I admire all of y'all's wisdom from your past milestones, but I also admire your thirst for the milestones to come. I think that's incredibly important and inspiring too. And sometimes it's easy to get lost in our little desks with our little computers and forget about being inspired. So you all inspire me. My next question is I think pretty important for all of us. Let's talk work-life balance. That's a real general one, but let's talk it, because I know it's a hard one to talk about for some of us, but maybe let's do it. Let's talk about it. Let's crack open the can of worms.
Really funny. That's a funny question.
Isn't it?
It's torturous.
I knew this would be a hot one, but let's try it anyway.
I'll go first because my answer is short. I have no balance between it's one or the other, and I'm still trying to figure that out. And I really struggle with it, especially this last project. It was about 10 and a half months long, and it was every day, all day. And yeah, I mean, I barely talked to people other than my wonderful assistant and additional writer, and I had no life. I barely slept and didn't take great care of myself. So don't do that. I don't know how, but hopefully the other coach is here to tell you how to do that. Yeah.
Oh. There's really no answer. I wish it wasn't the way it is. It's so silly, our industry. You'd think we were doctors saving lives. Like, it's so intense. It's just like, we need this now. Oh, you know, and it's just like, we all feel the stress and the panic. If we're not going to do it, someone else is going to do it. Like, I'm gonna it is really, really hard to find a work-life balance. For me, a big part, like I had to, so I was teaching piano for a while, and I found that was like a really nice stable income, but I was also composing full time, and I really, really, really didn't want to give up the stable income because there'd be that time between my contracts where I don't have income. And I kind of just had to take the leap of faith because it just got to a point where I was working from 6 a.m. till midnight and not taking weekends off, like eating dinner at my desk, just like, and I was just like, I'm so unhappy. I'm so burnt out. And that's not when you're in a position to create something wonderful or be like, I don't know, for me, it is important to stay balanced because or else you kind of like get jarred up creatively and it doesn't flow as easy. So I had to kind of recognize, okay, it's time to take that leap of faith and take a step back from the teaching. And I just can't do both of them anymore. And so for me, that did really help because now I've opened up space. And yeah, there'll be a couple months that goes by that maybe I don't have a contract or income, but hopefully the contracts that I do have would tie me over enough, or you kind of just learn to work with that. So that's part of it for me. But it's really, really hard. Like I'll get into times where it's so busy. Like I really find like scheduling things out. Like I'll have one of those like day planners where it's like things I'm going to eat today. How many glasses of water have I had? And I just need to like check those things off too, because you forget when your checklist is so big, you forget to check off like drink water, eat food, get a good night's sleep. Like, and so I think I get to a point where I get like really task mastery about myself if I'm like too busy. But it's starting to recognize when that happens. And I think it can only happen, like you can only really burn out so many times before you go, okay, something has to give, or I have to start saying no to contracts. And that's something that you reach a stage in your career and you go, hey, like I don't need to say yes to every single thing anymore, which has been the path for the last, 5 or 6 years or something. So there's really no one answer to solve that. And I think probably everyone that is in this industry will face that at some point. And it's unfortunate, but the more you can say, so this is something I just thought of as like, I was at VIF this weekend and I was talking with someone about this and how someone said no is a full sentence. No, like you don't need to say no because blah, 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 or no, but blah, 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 and define your reason why. So no is a full sentence. And by saying yes to everyone and every demand that's asked of you, sometimes you're actually saying no to yourself. Because by saying yes to, yeah, I'll make that extra revision, I'll do that extra thing, I'll go that extra mile. Now I'm saying no to me and my partner and my dog. And so I'm trying to start thinking about things in a different way where I'm going to start managing myself different and just start thinking about like, okay, I need to prioritize me a little bit too. And so it's a shift and it's a learning experience. I definitely haven't got it dialed in yet, but I'm starting to recognize what's not working for me and making adjustments to try and like shift into healthier habits that way.
And if I may, find yourself a great team. Start building that team now. That's all.
Good advice.
I feel very passionately about this topic. It is something that I feel like too, there is this expectation on the industry that you have to not have a work-life balance. Like, because if you do, then maybe you're not working hard enough or trying hard enough or something like that. And that's just not true. Like, it's just not true. I truly believe that with good organization, like every night before I go to bed, I make my to-do list for the next day, including the mundane things, like don't forget to check the mail. Like I put everything in there. Because also too, it feels really good to check those little easy things off. It's like a dopamine hit for your brain. And I always, if I can, try to work one day ahead on all my projects. So if there is something that comes up, I have like a buffer zone, my emergency fund for my project and my time emergency fund. I try to give myself 24 to 48 hour buffer zone if I can. It's not always a luxury that I'm given. Also, if there's something that is going to be not there's someone else who can make better use of this time, it's okay to outsource part of something, whether it be like something I'm working on right now. Like I haven't used Finale in like 7 years and they need a Finale score. I'm like, great, I'm gonna hire someone to do that. I could spend 12 hours doing that, or someone could do it in 2. And it's like, that's where, project money is well spent, things like that can really take tiny bits of load off your plate, and just look for little ways to just save little bits of time, because all that little bits of time, it adds up. Also, holding yourself accountable. We are our employee and our boss. Like we are everything. We're in charge of managing ourselves, which is awesome. But also, if you're not disciplined, it can be a curse. And so staying disciplined with yourself when you're work, like which is much easier said than done. So yeah, things like that really help. And just without going off on a tangent, like I was talking to a friend yesterday about the term work life, because you have work, which is a very small portion of your life, and then you have everything else in your life as the other half of the pie. And that is, in your life, you have taking care of yourself, your family, your other hobbies and passions, like your mental, physical, and emotional health. Like all of this is, and then work is the whole other half. Like that's not right. The pie should be divided much differently. And so I feel like after the past 3 years with the pandemic and everything, it's a lot of people are starting to recognize that a lot more. And just don't forget, the people you're working with on the other end of the screen aren't scary monsters that are like holding something over you. They're humans too, with families and struggling with the exact same thing. So I feel like, I know that was a bit of a tangent, but all those little things help just in tiny bits along the way.
Thank you. That's awesome. Tangelene, do you have any thoughts on this topic?
I know it's so tough because a lot of times the lines get blurred too, right? Because we all love music. Like that's like our passion. That's our pastime as well. So I think that can be the tough thing, is you're pouring all your heart and your artistry into it, and we feel like we got to go like crazy to get certain things achieved. But I would say I just always try to find at least a little something with like self-care. If I'm not going to be going out with friends, if I can at least put that towards like some self-care. You know what I mean? Oh, I hit some clicking. But yeah.
Yes, I'm just putting something in the chat. Sorry, I should have muted myself.
Okay, I'm like, where's that? Yeah, self-care, like at least a face mask or something. There was a time where I had, like last year, I had zero time for anything. I'm like, I hope I didn't lose like 5 years of. I feel like I look at my face, I'm like, has it been 5 years or has it been like 1 year? I think it's been 5 years. Anyway, but at least like a face mask at the end of the day, or if that means me being a little bad and buying like a $10 fancy coffee with some extra benefits in it, like, okay, I'll go do that. if it's gonna make my day, if I don't have time to do anything else, if I can put that into myself at least, it's gonna give me that extra energy that I need, because I'm putting it towards me. So at least find some sort of self-care each day, even if it's only 10-15 minutes.
I think that's a reasonable goal for all of us to set. Yeah, I love that. Y'all are so wise.
And also real quick, I find, which again, I admit I am horrible at the balance, but one thing that really helped this last year was recognizing where my creative clock is, which unfortunately doesn't kick in until like 8 p.m., which is the worst possible time. I'm also an insomniac, so that really doesn't help. But knowing that about myself, all the night before, I'll get things ready to the point where in the morning, it's not necessarily all the creative stuff. It's like orchestrating things out, or any of the administrative stuff, or music editing, or stemming, which thank you, assistant. But I found that really helped, because I would try to start writing immediately in the morning and I wouldn't get anything effectively done, or it would be a lot less work than if I was actually doing it in the time where my creative juices were flowing, so to speak. So yeah.
That's a great tip, knowing yourself.
Sorry.
What were you gonna say, Tangelene? No, go ahead, please.
Thanks for validating the fact that I'm just gonna be up all night, because I was trying to get myself to wake up early and like, oh, maybe I can like be that person. But I think you're just validating that I'm just gonna be crazy and be up all night.
I have tried to move that clock to the morning for years, and I can't do it. It's every time 8 or 10 p.m. and I'm like, bing, great.
All right.
It's good to know yourself. Oh, it looks like we have a question, Nyla. Hey, good to see you. Here's our question from Nyla. As someone who is planning on heading into LA in search of a team to join, what are some green flags when it comes to job opportunities and potential bosses? Great question. The goal is to work not only in a safe environment, but to feel respected as a musician, which seems like a challenge. Sadly, it is. That's my own tangent. Would you recommend other plans to becoming a full-time composer as an alternative? So great question. Oh, sorry, paths to becoming a full-time composer as an alternative. Great question. Does anyone want to jump in first?
Well, I could jump in. I would say first off the bat, like something you can recognize when you have like a one-on-one meeting or a coffee with someone is to see how they treat you. Also, like outside of their stature, where they're at, if they're totally open to letting you speak, hearing, you know, your background, letting the conversation be very two-sided. I think that's sometimes either a red flag or a green flag, just that initial instinct on how you feel around someone. How did that person make you feel when you left the coffee or you left their studio? Did you feel really open and like a higher energy, or did you feel really closed off and not safe? Those initial instincts can really go a long way, and you can relate that to just working with a potential collaborator too.
Yeah, I'm gonna
That's great advice.
Piggyback off that for sure. Follow, like, I can't say this enough. Follow your instincts, follow your gut. Like if you're not getting the right vibe, it's probably not the right situation. It is 98% based on just your vibe with that person. I've had a few different assistants. They've all been wonderful. And it wasn't even, I didn't hire them so much because of like, you know, all of the credits or, you know, schooling and all of that. Which funny enough, they're all from Columbia, but it was the vibe. We just clicked right away. And I felt like, okay, I already respect them. Everybody has my respect immediately, you know, and then I feel like we could sit in a room for 10 hours without wanting to like stab our ears with pencils or something. And, you know, also what can I bring to the table for them? What can I offer to them? Can I teach them anything or help them make more connections, you know, and hopefully it should be a mutual thing. And what was the other part of the question? Sorry.
Alternatives.
I think, you know, everybody's path is unique. I know a lot of people who are working full-time, just like, you know, side jobs to support their composing and vice versa. And so there isn't really a right path, I guess, as long as you're trying. I think green flags, just be open and honest, and I think don't I could go on for hours. I'm gonna stop myself. Just vibe with the person and be personal. I always say be personal, lean towards that more than professional, because nobody wants to talk to a brick wall, right? So yeah, vibe.
That's a really good point.
Can I jump in on the second half of that question? I think you guys have done an incredible job of covering the first half of that with the scene in LA and how to recognize when you're maybe not being respected. But in terms of the second half of the question with like, what are some other things you can do to help get you there? And I noticed earlier, Maria was asking a question, how do you get your projects? Do you do the research yourself, meet people, or are you the stage where you just have an agent? So I'd like to speak to that a little bit, because I think there's so many ways to get there. There's no one path. But something that is in your control is just pushing on as many doors as you can. So that means applying for as many programs as you can. Apply for mentorships, apply for programs that are funded. There's so much of that that might not necessarily be like a paid gig right away, but is an opportunity to showcase yourself and to maybe like work with an orchestra or get to work in different settings. So I would say like something that I've always done is I've applied for every grant, every program, every mentorship that I possibly qualify for. And maybe you push on 20 doors, but 5 of them open and you have the opportunity to go through that. And because of those mentorships I've done, because of the projects I've done, people have found me that way. So it's not really about going to a production company and saying, hi, I'm Amanda, I'd like to compose your next animated series. They're going to be like, I don't even know who you are. Why would I trust you with this multi-million-dollar thing, right? But if they start to see your name, okay, you're part of this, you've done this, you've got these credentials, you start to establish a little bit of momentum for yourself. So it doesn't just depend on relying on jobs coming to you to get momentum. Yeah, there's a big thing about being in the right place at the right time, and that helps, but there's a lot that you can do to create opportunities for yourself. And as to the agent thing, like I have an agent now, but they don't get you work. I think that's a misconception. They can get you work, but it's not your agent's job to get you work. It's your agent's job to revise your contracts and negotiate higher rates for you and negotiate better rights and make sure that, you know, you're not getting into a shoddy deal and representing you at festivals or whatever, but it's not their job to get you work. So I'm still bringing all my work to my agency. And sometimes I'll have the occasional pitch where they'll say, okay, Nickelodeon sent us this pitch. We're going to throw it out to a few composers, write a pitch. And a few of us will get the chance to write a pitch. But it's really about creating things for yourself and creating momentum yourself where you can. I recognize that's not always possible. I have a list of programs. I'm in Canada, so I'm not sure which ones will apply to those of you that are in the States. I know that the SCL and the AWFC have a bunch of things too, but if you are in Canada, feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to provide a list of resources of mentorships, programs, things like that can help you get started too.
Thank you, Amanda. That is so generous. Thank you all for your generous donation of your time today, for being here. We're out of time technically, so that really went by fast. Thank you all. And Nyla, thank you for that question, because I love that you're coming here with a hope and an expectation as well to be treated right. That's a new thing, I think, in this industry. And sorry, I'm outspoken. I'm excited about it. I think people coming in here with that hope and expectation as a duality is important and great, and it'll only be a good thing. So thank you for posing that question. Thank you all so much for being here. If anyone has any last questions, feel free, but no pressure to stay on the call because it is officially past 11 Pacific. So thank you all so much. Amazing talk.
Oh, thank you guys. Thanks, Connor.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
This has been so much fun to hear all of your different interpretations too. And I've learned a lot from you guys too today. So thank you so much for sharing. And thanks Connor and AWFC for having us.